If we focus exclusively on pursuing happiness, we may regard suffering as something to be ignored or resisted. We think of it as something that gets in the way of happiness. But the art of happiness is also, and at the same time, the art of knowing how to suffer well. If we know how to use our suffering, we can transform it and suffer much less. Knowing how to suffer well is essential to realizing true happiness.
So, I think the thing that's interesting about that is that oftentimes, we go through periods where we're in an uncomfortable situation, or, we're just in a new place and we're not really sure. And, being in that kind of space can bring up all kinds of things that we might call suffering, or just having a really hard time, or and I think it's important when we talk about how we move through that, because how we move through that really dictates what it is that we create after that period has passed, after that storm has passed. It's kind of like if there's a thunderstorm that's going on, and during a thunderstorm you freak out and you trash your house. Well, after that storm happens, you're still left with the trashed house and whatever else the storm is left behind. So there is a wisdom, there's a discipline, there is a trust that comes in really knowing how to move through periods that are not easy. Whatever that looks like for everyone. It's important to know how to move through that, because otherwise we can end up being our worst enemy, and in a way we can also end up prolonging that that suffering.
When when I feel into that passage, to me, what comes to mind is that um, when I got into information outside of the church, we'll put it like that. Suffering was a bad thing. If you were doing it right, if you were in your manifesting mood and doing all the things, then you shouldn't suffer. If you were suffering, it meant that there was something wrong with either you or something wrong with what you had done. And so I think about that because we have to start by telling ourselves the truth and allowing it to be okay. I think a lot of times people want to hide their suffering. And the thing about hiding your suffering is that nothing heals that doesn't come into the light. Mold mold grows in the darkness. But when we come to a place where, even if it's only to ourselves, that we acknowledge this is difficult, this is hard, I don't have the answers, I don't know what the next step is, but I'm here in this place. I think until we're honest with where we are for ourselves, can we even do any of the other things that move us beyond it? Um, I think that in suffering, um, you really learn yourself. Um, you really have the opportunity to get some lessons and see the people around you, um, as well as yourself.
Yeah, I really like the part where you were talking about getting to know you, because you getting to know you, and the way that you go about getting to know you in those circumstances is really the thing that's going to make or break the blessings and the opportunities that come from that space. Because, like you said earlier, depending on whatever background you come from, you may come from a background that teaches you that if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, then you're gonna be good. That you're not gonna suffer, and it's an inaccurate way that really sets people up to really have these huge hurdles around self doubt and um, depression, and just really feeling lost
Yeah.
and unsure about themselves. Because who said that you weren't gonna go through times that were hard or that were difficult? Who said that? In anyone's life, you're gonna have ups and downs. It's not always gonna be up. And so you have to learn how to move through those down periods with grace and to give yourself grace. And when you're going through those periods, really looking at yourself and saying, it's time for me to become more present with myself. And I think that is part of the lesson that you're really blessed with, right? Because regardless to what else is happening, the fact that you have an opportunity to fine tune yourself and get more in touch with yourself allows for you to grow and to transform and to heal in ways that you may have never ever 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 done if it wasn't for the situation that you're experiencing. And taking the time to be very present with yourself means that there's a certain kind of gratitude that you have to tap into that requires, sometimes it requires every last bit of you, right? Sometimes it's, if the only thing you can think of is, I'm grateful because I'm breathing. I'm grateful because the sun is shining on me. I'm grateful because the wind is blowing. I'm grateful because this bush standing next to me looks beautiful, right? Being able to become present with yourself in a way that what you see around you, even in the midst of chaos or suffering, um, is beauty. And it's finding those spaces, those little spaces that we miss very often when we're going through our lives. Finding those spaces of beauty, finding those spaces of love where we can pour in our gratitude. And that's the same energy that we get back. And when we're in that space, we realize in all the different ways that we're getting it, even if we don't understand the particular reason for that suffering. Um, so I thought that was a really um, powerful comment, because that is, for me, that's how I've moved through some of the most difficult challenges, is getting really tapped and tuned in to me and to who I am. And sometimes, you have to go back and you have to review and you got to look at, okay, what were my steps? You know, Sometimes we find that we made errors, and sometimes we find that we did everything right, and we still experience these particular things. But that's not a punishment, as much as it feels like it sometimes, depending on what it is that you're dealing with. But sometimes you are just in a space where you're being asked to get closer with you, to build you up. And more than likely, what you're going to find is as you do that, you're going to find the reason for that. Because maybe, as much as you may feel that you were suffering, maybe you were actually being guided to avoid something much, much, much worse. Maybe you were being redirected so that what you actually want, you get, and then you get even more than what you thought you wanted. Or maybe you're headed in a particular direction and there's something else that's greater for you.
I don't know. I want to talk about this thing that we're calling suffering some more. Um, there are times in your life when you are going through something and you feel like it is tearing you apart. It's a tower moment. Um, there are times when your life has fallen apart and perhaps you're responsible or feel responsible for other people. Um, it takes you to the very core of yourself. And so when I hear you talk about getting in touch and tapping in, you can't help but to be there because it cuts you to your very core. Um, it calls on you to have to stand for whatever it is that you believe in. Because sometimes that certainty, that knowing, whatever that is the only thing that you have left.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Either you do or you don't. Either you continue to move forward because that's all you can do, or you don't. Sometimes it's not just a little bit uncomfortable. Sometimes it is a call. Where are you standing at? Show and prove. You don't have a choice but to walk out what you have been speaking, what you have been talking. And what comes to mind for me is probably within the last 2 or 3 weeks, I have seen several people that have reflected back to me what it looks like, what people do. I've seen someone do the most uncomfortable thing that you can do, which is to be honest not only with yourself, but be honest with your community about where you are and what it is you're needing. How much courage it takes um, to be that okay
You.
with you,
Mm-hmm.
with you. I've seen people respond by running and hiding and or fighting with those that would be there to support them. Um, I felt my own, I want to use the word turmoil, but I use it in terms of the wrestling that comes when you're going through suffering or tower moment, whatever you want to call it, where you are dealing and being dealt with, where you're being asked to look at yourself and to see what these things are that are coming up for you. What are these emotions? How are you feeling today? What are you believing? You said this. Now, what is it that you really believe? And even in the midst of this, can you stand on and walk in who and what you say you are? And going back to what you said, I think those are some of the greatest gifts that you can get in those times.
Yeah. I was thinking about I forget your words exactly, but you said something to the effect of, when you're going through this suffering, when you're experiencing this suffering, taking a stand, and I think that sometimes people, and I've done it at different periods in my own life, where you don't really know what stand it is you're supposed to be taking. And I know for myself personally, my own personal experiences, sometimes you don't know because you're not even sure, grounded in what it is that you believe. Sometimes you kind of just floating out there and without any real grounded principle in self, and it doesn't mean that you have to lock down into, some kind of religious belief or anything like that, but yourself, right? What is it that you believe about yourself and the energies that participate in making the things possible, the universe, whatever that connection is for you? What is it that you are grounded in? And if you're not grounded in anything, it really turns the notch up on that suffering.
Yes, it does.
Because there's nothing anchoring you. There's nothing there to help to hold you when you're not even sure what's what and what's happening. Sometimes at the end of the day, it is your faith in whatever it is that keeps you grounded.
It is a certainty.
Yeah.
And I think that certainty is key. I was listening to, or actually, I read a post today, and it was someone talking about, I guess within the last month, it may have been a lot shorter than that. They'd been on 3 different continents in 3 different cities, and every place that they were, people were protesting, and how pissed off people are. That's called suffering. They protest because they are suffering. And so when you look at not only what's going on internally, what's going on in your life, but when you look at people collectively, this is the time where if you are not anchored in truth, when you're not anchored, you will have a very difficult time moving through. Now, maybe your anchor is your partner. Maybe it's your friend. Maybe it's your sister who helps to anchor you. But even with that, we have to begin to have our own anchor.
Yeah. There's a certain responsibility over your own life and your movements and your decisions that you gain when you find that anchor within yourself.
What is it that you believe? What is it that you believe about this life and the promises that life has made? Do you believe life has made any promises? This is a trust between you and the Most High, or whatever you call that. What is the agreement? What is that connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's always a way to move through any period, but we're talking about suffering in particular, but there's always a way to move through suffering with grace and to move it in a way where you are thriving. And, it may look like something completely different on the outside, but internally, what you are present with, what you are aware of, and what you're standing on, right, is a thing that really makes that a different experience. It turns that suffering to a period of growth, a period of transformation, of transition, versus it being a downfall, versus it being a tower moment in the worst possible ways, right? And it doesn't matter how that situation came about. It doesn't matter what the situation is. If you can find your truth and anchor yourself to that, you'll get through that storm.
I think it helps when you are one that is able and willing to go within for guidance, to be able to hear the guidance of spirit, to be able to hear, okay, what I don't know what to do. I need your guidance. I need your help. What is it that I'm to do in this moment? I think that it helps because if you know that you're moving in integrity, if you know that you are moving and seeking to do what is best, even if it's not what you think and what you want, but you're seeking the truth in the moment, I think that it strengthens you. I think that it strengthens whatever you're moving through. It strengthens your ability to stand. And when you don't have that, it that suffering turns into something else.
Yeah.
It's not a way of life. We weren't meant to suffer.
And the suffering can continue.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a way of life, but when we come through these storms, who are you in the storm?
I wrote a poem about it.
You want to hear it? Here you go. Yeah. Who are you in the storm? And I think in answering that question, it allows you to be able to move through the storm.
Yeah.
Who do you want to be in the storm? And then do you have support systems, people, environment around you that help to strengthen you, even just by their presence? And going through a storm can be a gift because it shows you who you have around you. Sometimes in the midst of a storm, you realize, I need to clear some things out. And maybe that is part of the gift of this storm.
I was thinking, because what happens if, the storm comes and you realize that you don't have anyone in your corner? How do you get from the point of not having that support to having that support? And I think it's an energetic thing, because if even in that time, where you feel like you don't have support around you, you are doing whatever it is that resonates with you to get grounded, to get quiet, to be with self, you are naturally going to come across someone or something that continues to feed you and nurture you and helps to solidify you.
Well, the thing is that when we look in nature, I like to look in nature and see what nature does because we are nature. Nothing in nature works by itself.
Yeah.
Everything in nature that is organic, not man-made, not no Frankenstein stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has reciprocity. There is an exchange. And so I'm looking at my environment and the people and the things that I thought I could count on, I can't count on. Show me, bring to me those who resonate, those who can be a support, those who I can also support. I think sometimes we just have to put the question out into the ethers that this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm needing. And sometimes you'll find it in spirit. Sometimes you'll find it in spirit working through a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
But no question goes unanswered.
Yeah. I think, it really calls on you to be in that space of gratitude too. Because if you're in a space of gratitude, your heart is open. You might be willing to talk to someone you would never have spoken to. Or, or even if you would have spoken to that person, maybe you wouldn't have heard them the way that you heard them. Maybe you wouldn't have felt them the way that you felt them. Maybe the bird that flew by or the bee that buzzed around your head, right? Maybe in that moment, if you're in a space of gratitude and you're open, those things are the exact confirmation that you needed to know that you're doing what you need to do, that you're in the right space, that you're making the right decisions, that sunshine and sweet things and honey is coming, but you have to get to a point where you're opening yourself up, your heart up to that. And one of the easiest ways to do that is just to get present with your gratitude. So
And
that
breathe.
Yeah, definitely breathe. So that you can become aware and awake to all of the support that is around you. Because sometimes it may not be a physical person.
Right.
Sometimes it is the air. Sometimes it's the creek that's running, on the corner. Maybe it's the way that the leaves are rustling. Maybe it's the way that the wind grabbed you up at just the right moment. And those become the most valuable things that they can't be taken away from you. They become pieces to that anchor within yourself that you're building.
Absolutely. That's why I said, in nature and observing nature, nature is our greatest teacher because, you know, up until recently maybe, the animals know what and who they are. They haven't forgotten their essence. Where sometimes people can get lost in all the distractions and narratives. But to go out into nature and to let her talk to you, let her show you things. How does nature move through a storm? How do the animals move through a storm? Sometimes they can be our greatest teachers if we're open to seeing something more than what we think we know.
Mm-hmm. And knowing that in that too, no matter how dark or crazy or chaotic that storm may be at any particular point, that storm is still a moment.
Right.
And that moment will pass if you allow it.
Right.
So moving through it without trying to define it as what your life is or who you are or any of that, because maybe it was just there to help you to get clear on who you are and to help you to strengthen that core part of yourself that knows to move on faith, that knows to move on truth, your truth, whatever that is. And you want to say something?
Yeah, when you were talking, I thought about water, and these times, these moments of suffering, these periods of suffering, it's like water. It's like putting your hand in the ocean, and instead of trying to hold on to the water or holding on to the pain or the sorrow, allowing it to wash over and through your fingers, allowing it to pass through.
Mm-hmm.
And, in the midst of its passing, really taking the goodness that it brings, because there's always goodness in everything,
Mm-hmm.
but still allowing it to pass through you.
Yeah.
So that you don't become the
Yeah.
suffering.
Yeah. That was a beautiful way to put that. Yeah. Yeah, I was like, as you were talking, the thing that came to mind was what is the saying? Is it sunshine comes in the morning?
Mm.
But sunshine comes in the morning, and so regardless to where you are, know that it is a moment. And when you stop trying to fight the moment, when you stop trying to
Deny the moment, ignore the moment,
suppress the moment, hide it, whatever. When you get out of trying to do that, and you begin to accept the lessons and the blessings in that moment, that storm begins to pass. If only because you're not holding it. You're allowing it to bring what it's meant to bring, and you're releasing it so that you can be and stand better and stronger and wiser, more grounded, more confident in self. And you're ready to do things and bringing in and have open doors to places and spaces that you never would have even thought of had you not fortified yourself in the way that is being, provided.
You open yourself to new answers, to new possibilities. When you leave your fingers, we talked about the ocean water, when you leave your fingers open, you open yourself to solutions,
Mm-hmm.
to perspectives that you may not have had before, may not have been in the position to hold before.
Yeah.
And, we don't get the answers by running. We don't get the answers by denying. We don't get the answers by blaming ourselves. Like, I must not be doing something right if this ain't working.
Or others.
Right. Or blaming others. That's even worse in some ways than blaming self. All of it is a distraction from the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say something. And I got to thinking about what you were saying and completely forgot. I'm not sure, but yeah, I think there is a magic in. Oh, I know what it was. When you're in that space, you're also allowing for spirit to move.
Absolutely.
Right? Because in that space, once again, you're never alone. But sometimes we miss that. Sometimes we don't understand it, and we close ourselves off to that help. But when you can get yourself to a point where you're open, right? Regardless to where you are in that openness. As you are able to open yourself, you allow for something greater than yourself to help you along that path.
You allow your ancestors to come in. My father that just passed, my grandmother, I allow them to show up. It can be very magical. It can be very magical to find a flower that, someone who has left their physical body, it shows up and you know that that's them, or the smell of something and you know that that's them. It can be a very magical time if we're open and paying attention.
Mm-hmm. And that's where the present and that's what self and that gratitude comes in, because those are like the magical keys to a magical experience. The greater in tune with yourself and your gratitude that you can be, the more magical the world becomes.
Yeah.
Or the more magical you begin to see the world, because the world is magical, right? If you have eyes to see it. Mm-hmm. And most especially in those times when we feel like we're not okay or things are not okay. Or even beyond think, when things aren't okay.
Yeah.
Even then, you'll find that they are.
Yeah. So, in this moment, take a deep breath in and I blow it out, and I allow the universe, my ancestors, nature, I allow them to be with me. Mm-hmm. I allow them to show me that I'm not alone. I allow them to show me new perspectives and new ways of being. And they strengthen me even in the midst of the storm, so that when the sun shines again, I am better, I am stronger, I am more beautiful, and my life is more beautiful because of it.
Yeah. It was a verse for those who know the Bible, at least know this verse. I'm sure even if you aren't really into the Bible, you've heard this verse at some point. But it talks about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And in that, right, that's a prayer that I use a lot when I'm in a period that feels like that or that is like that. And it reminds me, it reminds me that I'm not alone. It reminds me that I am being prepared for something much greater. Regardless to the adversity, regardless to the things that seem to be standing against me.
And a friend of mine said, instead of looking for what's wrong, look for what's right.
Mm-hmm. And you'll always find the answer to your question when you do that.